Hello everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel, that is Anatomy Simplified. And today I am going to simplify a very important topic, that is Bell's palsy and the facial palsy. Before starting the Bell's palsy and facial palsy, let's make a very beautiful face like this, and we divide this face into four quadrants. These are upper two quadrants and these are lower two quadrants. See, this one is the right side and this is the left side. So this is right upper quadrant, this is right lower quadrant, this is left upper quadrant, and this is left lower quadrant, isn't it? This diagram is representing the coronal section of the brain along with the brain stem. This is the coronal section of the cerebral hemispheres, probably at the motor area. And these fibers are the corpus callosum fibers, which is the largest commissural fiber. And this I have drawn the fornix. This is the midbrain, this is pons. And what are these two red structures? Actually, these are the facial nerve nucleus. As we are studying the Bell's palsy, so we need to know where the facial nerve nucleus is present. And this is the section of the medulla. This is the front view of the medulla, rather front view of the brainstem and the cerebral hemisphere. Now what happens, as we all know that the fibers from the right side controls the left side. It means the right cerebral hemispheres, as we all know that the right cerebral hemisphere, it controls the left side of the body, and the left cerebral hemisphere controls the right side of the body. It means that somewhere the fibers, they are crossing each other. Now we will draw all those crossing fibers. Now actually what happens, we will use some another color. We will use the green color. See, the fibers which originate from the cerebral hemisphere, these are the corona radiata fibers which pass through the midbrain, then pons. Somewhere they will cross inside the pons and they will relay in the facial nerve nucleus. These are 80% fibers. It means that the 80% fibers which were coming from the right cerebral hemisphere cross to the opposite facial nerve nucleus and they relay there. Now what happens, the 80% fibers which have crossed and relayed in the facial nerve nucleus, these are upper motor neuron fibers. And now the fibers which are originating from the facial nerve nucleus, they will go and supply the upper quadrant and the lower quadrant. Now what happens, both the left upper and left lower quadrants receives the nerve supply via the facial nerve from the same side, and which were further receiving the upper motor neuron fibers from the opposite cerebral hemispheres. माने कि 80% फाइबर्स जो क्रॉस करे थे फेशियल नर्व में, वो अपर मोटर न्यूरॉन थे जो फेशियल नर्व से ओरिजिनेट हुए और फेस की मसल्स को सप्लाई करे डायरेक्ट टू द ऑपोजिट हाफ. दीज आर द लोअर मोटर न्यूरॉन फाइबर्स. ठीक है, सो डिसेंडिंग फाइबर्स प्रोबेबली हैज अपर मोटर न्यूरॉन एज वेल एज लोअर न्यूरॉन फाइबर्स. नाउ वन मोर इम्पॉर्टेंट थिंग, द 20% फाइबर्स. ये तो 80% फाइबर्स है ना. What about the 20% fibers? The 20% fibers will also go into the facial nerve nucleus but of the same side, and they will relay here. Now what will these fibers do? These are 20% fibers and these will supply only and only the upper quadrant, that is of the same side. 80% fibers वाले थे वो ऑपोजिट साइड वाले दोनों क्वाड्रेंट्स को सप्लाई कर रहे थे. जो 20% वाले हैं वो सेम साइड के अपर क्वाड्रेंट को सप्लाई करेंगे, लोअर को नहीं करेंगे. दे विल सप्लाई ओनली एंड ओनली द अपर क्वाड्रेंट. रिमेंबर, दे विल नॉट सप्लाई द लोअर क्वाड्रेंट. So the facial nerve has the fibers from the opposite side as well as from the same side. From the opposite side it receives 80% fibers and from the same side it receives the 20% fibers. This is the lower motor neuron and these are upper motor neurons for the facial nerve. So now each half of the face is getting the supply from the opposite side and from the same side. The upper quadrant receives the supply from both these sides. So now what happens? The upper quadrant receives the supply from same side as well as from the opposite side, but the lower quadrant receives the nerve supply only and only from the opposite side. Now what will happen? Suppose we give a lesion here. This is lesion number A. Now this is injury to the facial nerve, because we all know that this hole is the facial nerve which supplies the muscles of face. If we give any lesion to the facial nerve, it will cut off the nerve supply to the face on both the quadrants, upper as well as lower quadrants, irrespective of from where they are getting the upper motor neurons. यानी अगर हमने फेशियल नर्व पे लेजन दे दिया, कट कर दिया, तो दोनों के दोनों क्वाड्रेंट्स चले जाएंगे एक हाफ के. ठीक है. अब हमको इससे कोई मतलब नहीं है कि वो 80% आ रहे थे या 20% आ रहे थे, क्योंकि हमने फेशियल नर्व कंप्लीटली काट दी है. दिस रिजल्ट्स इन पैरालिसिस ऑफ कंप्लीट हाफ साइड ऑफ फेस. पूरे के पूरे आधी फेस का पैरालिसिस हो जाएगा. दिस इज कॉल्ड एज बेल्स पाल्सी. So how to define a Bell's palsy? Bell's palsy is the lower motor neuron lesion number 1. ठीक है. लोअर मोटर न्यूरॉन क्यों है? क्योंकि ये वाले अपर मोटर न्यूरॉन थे, फेशियल नर्व न्यूक्लियस था, ये लोअर मोटर न्यूरॉन है. सो बेल्स पाल्सी इज द लोअर मोटर न्यूरॉन लेजन, इंजरी टू द फेशियल नर्व, पैरालिसिस ऑफ सेम साइड ऑफ हाफ ऑफ फेस. ठीक है. हाफ साइड फेस का पैरालिसिस, वो भी सेम साइड का, क्योंकि सेम ही साइड की फेशियल नर्व इंजर हुई है. नाउ व्हाट इफ वी गिव एन इंजरी टू दीज फाइबर्स? लेजन नंबर बी. यहां पे इंजरी हमने कर दी, तो दिस इज लोअर मोटर न्यूरॉन और अपर मोटर न्यूरॉन. श्योर दैट दिस इज द अपर मोटर न्यूरॉन पैरालिसिस. इस केस में क्या होगा? दीज 80% वर सप्लाइंग टू द upper quadrant as well as lower quadrant, but upper quadrant is also getting the nerve supply from the same side, that is 20% fiber. तो upper quadrant spare हो जाएगा कि नहीं होएगा? So in case of upper motor neuron lesion or the facial palsy, what will happen? The upper quadrant will be spared and there will be paralysis of only and only lower part of face, that too of the opposite side. This is called as facial palsy. तो फेशियल पाल्सी में सिर्फ और सिर्फ लोअर क्वाड्रेंट जाएगा, वो भी ऑपोजिट साइड का जाएगा क्योंकि फाइबर्स क्रॉस कर गए थे. ठीक है. अपर क्वाड्रेंट इन्वॉल्व क्यों नहीं होगा? क्योंकि अपर क्वाड्रेंट इज गेटिंग द नर्व सप्लाई फ्रॉम द ऑपोजिट साइड प्लस 20% फाइबर्स फ्रॉम द सेम साइड ऑल्सो. दिस इज द मेन डिफरेंस बिटवीन द बेल्स पाल्सी and the facial palsy. So facial palsy is the upper motor neuron lesion, whereas Bell's palsy is the lower motor neuron lesion. इसमें complete facial nerve इंजर हो गई और इसमें सिर्फ और सिर्फ upper motor neurons इंजर हुए हैं. So thank you.